In today's episodes, we have gotten our hands on the all-new BMW 5 Series. This model is the M550i xDrive, which is kind of an interesting twist for BMW and the 5 Series. Now, the M550i is not an M5. We will see an M5 sometime soon, but this is the next level down in performance. BMW has decided to start slicing their performance pie really finely these days. So we have M Sport, M Performance, and then M. In a nutshell, M Sport is looks better, handles better. M Performance is looks better, handles better, and goes faster. And the full-on M package changes major body components in order to get you the maximum in performance. That means that the next M5 is going to be a special kind of crazy, because this M550i is 100 pounds lighter than the previous generation M5 and actually faster 0 to 60. Up front, we find BMW's latest adaptive LED headlamps, and the design has changed very slightly from the last generation M5. We still have the distinctive rings around each headlamp module. And of course, because we are in the M550, we have a slightly different front bumper going on than the rest of the 5 Series lineup. Instead of a chrome kidney grille, we actually get sort of a brushed metal effect. You'll find the night vision camera right over here on this side. These are active grille shutters, so they do open later. And then we have the radar adaptive cruise control sensor right there below the license plate. The new 5 Series has grown a bit in this generation. It's now 195.4 inches long. That makes this actually about 2 inches longer than the brand new E63 AMG. Of course, in terms of overall performance, this slots somewhere between the E63 and the E43 AMG. And as always, this is also a direct competitor to the Audi A6 and perhaps something like the Volvo S90, although not in the M550 form. The 5 Series retains the classic proportions we've come to know, with a definite trunk lid back here and a rear glass that is still somewhat upright. That helps improve rear passenger room more than we find in something like the 6 Series Grand Coupe or the Mercedes 4-door coupes. One of the tweaks we get for the M550 is a functional vent right here after the front wheel. This works with the vents that go on in front of the front wheel to help direct the air around the vehicle more efficiently, improve aerodynamics, reduce drag. Out back, we find the classic BMW lines with taillight modules that are obviously different than the previous generation, but very similarly styled. We have an LED light pipe running right there inside them. There's an M badge right over here on the passenger side and an xDrive badge on the driver's side, because this vehicle does have all-wheel drive. Because the M550 is an M Performance vehicle, not a full-on M, we get an M Performance logo right there on top of this engine. This is a 4.4-liter V8 twin-turbo engine, and it produces 456 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. This is mated to an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission, not some funky dual-clutch box, and it sends power to all 4 wheels. That puts the M550 notably ahead of the E43 AMG, which produces 396 horsepower, but definitely behind the E63 AMG. The E63 AMG, of course, will be the competitor to the all-new BMW M5 when we see that next year. Front seat comfort is excellent in the 5 Series, especially if you get the top-end seats, which is what we're in right here. These seats feature an electric extending thigh cushion, inflatable side bolsters, and you can change the curvature of the seat back. Although this model does not have it, there's also an available front seat massage function. The tilt-telescopic steering column is electrically operated, and it is linked to the seat memory as well. Unlike some vehicles in the luxury mid-size sedan segment, the passenger seat has exactly the same range of motion as the driver, and it also has a 2-position memory. When it comes to rear seat comfort, I'm going to give the 5 Series 10 out of 10 points. These are comfortable and accommodating, but it is important to keep in mind that the 5 Series is, of course, a mid-sized luxury sedan. That means that in general terms, this is not that far off of the interior that we find in something like a Camry or an Accord. That said, because of the very upright profile that we still find in the 5 Series, headroom is generous. If I lean back in the seat, my hair is not brushing the ceiling. I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom left. That's definitely more than we find in some of the competition in this segment. Behind the trunk lid, we find a very generous 18.7 cubic feet of trunk capacity. This is one of the larger trunks in the mid-size luxury sedan segment, and that's likely because this is used in executive transport in a wide number of worldwide markets, and so we do need to have a decent amount of luggage capacity for that kind of use. The cargo area is not only deep, as you can see, because I have that 22-inch roller bag rolled all the way back there to the rear seat backs, but it also is fairly wide, and you can almost put a 22-inch roller bag in that position and close the trunk lid. The load floor in the 5 Series does not lift up, and there's no spare tire under there, although we do get some additional storage on each side. One open storage pocket over here on the right side, and then one that's right behind this lid on the left. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that our model does have about $6,000 worth of options on it. Up front we find fixed height seat belts and four-way adjustable headrests with the butterfly headrest feature. This model also has the up-level seat package, which allows you to change the curvature of the seat back. That's why we find just a very slight crease right here, and of course this separate section right here that splits open as you tilt this top section of the seat forward. The front seats also feature inflatable side bolsters and that extending thigh cushion. The front door panels are coated entirely in either stitched material, as we see up top in this charcoal section, the tan section right there in the middle, or soft touch injection molded plastics right there along the bottom in that cargo area. There's an ambient light pipe that runs right there above the wood trim on the door, and you can adjust the color inside the iDrive system. The wood in our particular model is an unlacquered open pore wood. It's a little bit difficult to show you on camera, but the accent lighting extends to the speaker grills, both lower on the door where the cone is lit up, and the tweeter on the front door that has sort of a whirlpool pattern of light pipes inside. Moving over to the dashboard, we find more stitched material on top, more of that open pore wood trim. We have some metal trim running right there across the side, and of course soft touch plastics lower on the dash. On the passenger side, we find a bin-style glove compartment with enough room for small tablet computers. If the video looks a little choppy to you right now, I did have to slow down the frame rate on our camera to 15 frames per second in order to keep this from flickering. That's not something you'll see in person, of course, it's just the way that cameras tend to view refreshing LCDs like this. Because we have the optional Bowers & Wilkins sound system, we have that center channel speaker right there behind this iDrive display. And on the left side, you'll notice that we have the latest iteration of Apple Carplay, which is a wireless system. So I have my iPhone 7 Plus paired with the system right here, and you'll notice I don't have a cable like other implementations of Apple CarPlay. In this version, Apple CarPlay is operating over Bluetooth, and it's just as snappy as CarPlay operating over a USB cable. But this is not the biggest change for the iDrive system, because you'll notice I'm actually touching the screen and interacting with CarPlay via a touchscreen. Now we still have an iDrive rotary controller, and you can use the rotary controller to interact with Apple CarPlay, but personally I found touching the screen just a little bit easier. And of course, you actually can touch pretty much everything in this system. It's not limited to just Apple CarPlay. All the various functions in iDrive are now touch enabled. You'll still find BMW's connected drive options, which are integrated apps in the system. Those are not smartphone driven. The built-in navigation software with 3D information, but not Google Satellite Overview like we find in Audi's MMI. The model we're driving also features gesture control, so if I wiggle my finger like this right in front of the screen, for instance, it turns the volume up and down. Now personally, I found gesture control to be an option that's probably not worth getting, because doing this in front of your navigation screen means you're taking your hands off the steering wheel and there's a volume control on the wheel. You'll notice an ambient light strip separating the iDrive display from this wood trim. We have two large air vents. Hazard light button. This button engages and disengages the intelligent safety systems on the vehicle. We then have a mode button, band button, volume power knob, and then some touch-sensitive buttons for presets in the system. You'll find track forward over here and an eject button for the single-slot optical disc player. We then have the controls for the 3-zone automatic climate control system down below. Moving down from there, we have BMW's latest key with, of course, the M stripes right over here on the side. This roller compartment opens up to reveal 2 cup holders and a wireless charging mat. The wireless charging mat is large enough for most phablet-style cell phones. Between the front seats, we find BMW's joystick-style shifter. There's a shift button right over here on the left, and then we pull down for drive, toggle over to the left for the manual or sport mode, then we pull towards the driver for gear up, push away for gear down. If you want to park the car, we press the P button right there on top, and the controller returns over there to the right side. If you want reverse, we press the unlock button and toggle all the way forward. To the right of that, we find the familiar BMW Idrive controller. We have some direct access buttons to navigation, map, media, communications, etc. Back and option buttons down below. As before, this scrolls around, toggles up, down, side to side, clicks down to enter, and of course offers finger writing recognition. To the left of the shifter, we find the traction control enable disable button, and if I shield this area, you'll see the adaptive drive mode selection buttons. We have access to Sport, Sport Plus, and Sport Individual, Comfort, Eco Pro, and of course Eco Pro Individual. There's also an adaptive mode if you want to let the car decide for you. Behind that, there's a button to enable and disable the parking sensors and the 360-degree camera, auto brake hold, and an electric parking brake. Between the front seats, we have a leather-wrapped center armrest that opens in the middle to reveal a small storage compartment. This is where you'll find a USB input and a 12-volt power port. On the driver's side, we find a partial LCD instrument cluster. Unlike many instrument clusters, there isn't a sheet of plastic between these physical rings right here and the driver. That helps give this display a little bit more of a clean 3D look, but it may be a little bit more difficult to clean. This is quite a large LCD, and it actually extends all the way across the gauge cluster, even though large portions of the LCD are actually obscured by these physical rings. In an interesting move, you'll notice that the tachometer over here, 7 all the way on up to about 1.5, this is actually a physical ring, and then this portion right here is imitated on the screen itself. The LCD is not as customizable and it does not change quite as much as other vehicles out there, although it does change colors when we go to Sport or Eco Pro mode, or of course the normal mode. This is also where you'll find certain vehicle readouts like your trip computer information, the status of your radar adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assistance systems, and displays like your average fuel economy, instant fuel economy, etc. The steering wheel is a thick-rimmed 3-spoke design with aggressive sport grips up on top. We have paddle shifters on the back. You'll find down on the left, up on the right over there, and the paddles move with the steering wheel. The controls for the radar adaptive cruise control system are found over here on the left side of the wheel. We have a leather-wrapped airbag cover, and then on the right side of the wheel we find the controls for the infotainment system. Mode is pretty self-explanatory. If you want to change stations or change tracks, you use this rotary knob right here, and because we have the heads-up display, you'd be looking in the heads-up display for what you're changing to, and then you'd click down to enter. You'll find the heated steering wheel button right here under the airbag cover. Heads-up displays are notoriously difficult to film, but you'll see on the right side there we have that infotainment readout. We also get the status of our active safety systems, speed limit information, current speed, and of course turn-by-turn navigation directions. The big difference between the brand new M550 and the previous generation M5 is that this has all-wheel drive, and BMW has been very reluctant to put all-wheel drive on any M product. Up until very recently, the only M cars that had all-wheel drive were the M SUVs. When you think of it this way, the M Performance line makes a lot of sense because it allows BMW to sell a performance vehicle with all-wheel drive while trying to keep the M brand as pure as possible. All-wheel drive is the key reason that this is faster 0 to 60 than the previous generation M5. We clocked 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Some publications have been able to get this down to around 3.8. That's a very, very quick 0 to 60 time, and notably faster than something like the E43 AMG. While Mercedes has been willing to put the full-on AMG badge on less powerful vehicles, BMW is taking a slightly different approach with this M Performance line. That means that while we have the 0 to 60 performance that we found in the previous generation M product, everything about the M550 is perhaps just a little bit below a full-on M vehicle. The suspension especially is very livable in this vehicle. I'm actually in the firmest mode right now, but if I push this over to the comfort setting, this is the kind of vehicle you can not only drive every day, but you could probably drive every day as an executive transport. We still of course feel some of the smaller imperfections on the road, but this is definitely a solid luxury performance car suspension. This soaks up the larger bumps without a big problem. Potholes don't really jar the cabin at all. But of course, if you want to put this in the Sport or Sport Plus mode, then we get much firmer suspension settings and of course more aggressive throttle responses, more aggressive transmission responses, etc. And when you do that, the M550 can really dance. But again, this is not going to be the same kind of dance that we'll see in the brand new M5 coming next year. Now personally, I'm okay with that because I prefer a more balanced vehicle. I've always thought that the full-on M5 was just a little bit too hardcore for my tastes, but this is exactly the kind of vehicle that I like. 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, a very, very comfortable seat. I'd probably get the one with the optional massage feature in it, and all the gadgets and gizmos that you'd want. And of course, even though this has an all-wheel drive system in it, this all-wheel drive system is different than, for instance, Audi's Quattro system because of the weight balance in the BMW 5 Series. BMW is very, very dedicated to neutral weight balance, and that means trying to put about the same amount of weight on the front axle as on the rear axle. And it's really noticeable in neutral handling situations. When you push this in the corners, power off, it doesn't feel like the front of the vehicle is heading for the end of the corner. And that's a little bit different than we find in the average Audi product because they are just a little bit heavier up front. BMW has of course tuned this all-wheel drive system to give us a solid rear-wheel drive power bias, but it does mean that this is going to be a little bit less fun if you like a definite rear-wheel drive dynamic in the corners than something like a full-on M5. When you start really pushing this in the corners, this is going to feel much more sure-footed, much more secure than the average rear-wheel drive vehicle with this kind of power under the hood, but it's not going to be quite as much fun. All-wheel drive definitely tempers the personality of a performance vehicle. Now that could be good or that could be bad, it really just depends on your preference. As you'd expect out of a luxury vehicle like this, the cabin is very quiet, and fuel economy is better than you might think. We were able to spend more than a day in about 200 miles in the M550i, and we were averaging about 22 miles per gallon, which is an excellent fuel economy score for a vehicle like this. Of course, if you start driving this car harder, it's going to take a lot of gasoline to make over 450 horsepower, so your fuel economy will definitely drop. Although fuel economy is not necessarily a major consideration for some luxury car shoppers, for others it definitely is. And that's why we have an Eco Pro mode in the M550i as well. The Eco Pro mode tries to optimize everything in the vehicle for better fuel economy, from the air conditioning system to the way the transmission shifts, and it will also engage a coasting mode to try and reduce fuel consumption when you're gliding along at lower speeds. The M550i is not the fastest vehicle in this segment, it's not the best handling vehicle in this segment, it's not necessarily the most luxurious vehicle in this segment either, but it does all of these things extremely well, and that's why if I had the money to choose a mid-size luxury sedan, the M550i would be right at the top of my list. I would choose this over the E43 AMG. We get more power under the hood, better performance. I like the way this transmission shifts better than the Mercedes-Benz 9-speed automatic as well. I would probably also pick this over the next tier up in performance. I would take the M550 over the upcoming M5, over an E63, because this is more livable. This is a more comfortable vehicle. The transmission is a normal 8-speed automatic transmission, not some funky dual-clutch transmission. It's just a car that's very, very easy to live with. The BMW is also notably more powerful and faster 0 to 60 than something like a CTS V Sport or most versions of the Jaguar XF. Until BMW releases the M5, the M550 is going to be the most expensive 5 Series in the US. This starts at $73,400. As we've been driving it right here, it came in at around $88,000. In terms of comparative pricing, the M550i does very, very well, because a Mercedes-Benz E43 AMG, which has less power than the 550i, will set you back $71,600, and if you comparably equip it as we have this particular model, it'll be about as expensive or actually a little bit more, depending on exactly what you put in that vehicle. If you want that next level of performance, then we have something like the E63 AMG at $104,000. Obviously, that's much faster and much more dynamic than the M550i, because the M5 is going to be the competitor to the E63. So expect M5 pricing to be fairly close to the E63 overall. I wouldn't be surprised if the next generation M5 was about $25,000 more expensive than the M550i that we've been driving. Based on my experience with the previous generation 5 Series, I did expect to like the M550, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I actually did. 0 to 60 performance is obviously excellent, under 4 seconds 0 to 60, thanks to the all-wheel drive system and of course the twin-turbo V8 engine under the hood. But we also have a very comfortable and very livable interior, and the overall tuning of the M550i is exactly what I would want in a mid-size performance luxury sedan. I'm not really after the absolute in performance, so something like the M5 just isn't livable for me. It's unquestionably a lot of fun to drive, but the suspension ends up generally too firm in those full-on M products for my tastes. Same thing going on there with the E63 AMG. It's just a little bit too hardcore for me for daily driving, but something like the M550i is absolutely perfect. And of course, it's about $25,000 less starting. And of course, even though this is the comfortable option, it is still a very dynamic vehicle. This definitely handles better than your average run-of-the-mill mid-size luxury sedan, something like an Audi A6, or even the lesser forms of the BMW 5 Series. So if my money was on the line and I had about $80,000 to spend on a mid-size luxury sedan, this is definitely the option that I would pick. If I had a little bit less to spend on a mid-size luxury sedan, then I might start exploring other options, but if you're looking in this $70,000 to $80,000, perhaps $90,000 range, definitely put the M550i on your shopping list. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2018 BMW M550i all-wheel drive. Be sure to find us over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, and if you want to support this channel, and I hope you do, head over to patreon.com and find us over there as well. I'll see you next week.